Okay, I think we're ready to start. Oh, a couple more people. Okay. So I'm going to talk today about zero-knowledge proofs. This is going to be, it's meant to be an overview. Perhaps it would be good for a show of hands, actually. Is anybody here completely new to zero-knowledge proofs? Are you all? Okay. And is anybody working on projects involving zero-knowledge proofs? Okay, that's good. So, yeah, it's difficult to know exactly how to pitch this because it could be a very deep subject. So I'll probably make it fairly general rather than going into very much detail about any particular proof or project. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how that works out. So to introduce myself, I am the CEO of a company called Extropy. We're a blockchain and cryptography consultancy based in Oxford. We do general blockchain development, but we also do zero-knowledge proof development as well, and consult on that. I have one of my developers here, Carol. We also do audits, and we do a lot of workshops, and I'll come back to that later because we run workshops around zero-knowledge proofs, so we try to get more people into this area, and it's a very exciting area. But if you need to contact us, please, there's contact details. We are hiring. I guess you're going to hear that a lot today and over the next few days. So if you're interested in working in this area, please come and talk to me afterwards or get in touch. What I will talk about today, I'll start off with an intuitive introduction to zero-knowledge proofs for those of you who are new to it. I'll talk a little bit about proof systems and the cryptography behind zero-knowledge proofs. I'll go through a timeline, a little history of how they've come about, and then look at some current research in the areas, and look at some use cases. Because one question I often get from clients or people who are interested in this technology is that, yes, it's really interesting, but how is this used? So it's useful to have a look at some use cases. And if you want these slides, I don't know if they'll be available elsewhere, but there's a URL there, you can get hold of them. Okay, so to introduce zero-knowledge proofs, typically we have three actors involved. There may be a creator of the proof, or that could be the prover as well. But then usually we have a prover, who's typically called Peggy, and a verifier, we'll call him Victor. And the idea behind this is that Peggy has some secret. She wants to prove to Victor that she knows this secret, but she doesn't want Victor to know what the secret is. In fact, all she wants to do is to show that she has knowledge of the secret and give away no other information at all. And that really is, in essence, what a zero-knowledge proof is about. An intuitive example, one I particularly like, is the Where's Wally books, or Where's Waldo if you're from the US. So in these, there's a character, Wally, who's very distinctively dressed. He's in a picture surrounded by lots of other people who are similarly dressed, and you have to find him. But if you imagine that Peggy has indeed seen this picture and she has found Wally in the picture, and she wants to prove to Victor that she has found him, but she knows that if she points out where Wally is in the picture, that Victor will also claim, oh yes, I found him too. And she doesn't want that. So to prevent Victor cheating, what she can do is take a large piece of paper and cut out a hole in the paper the size of Wally in the picture. She can take the book, put this underneath this large sheet of paper, and so show to Victor through this hole in the paper that she has indeed found Wally. Though because the piece of paper is very large, Victor cannot see where the book is in relation to the rest of the paper, and so he gains no information about where Wally is in the picture. And so she has proven to him that she has found Wally, she knows the secret, but she has not given away information about where exactly he is. So a very physical example of a zero-knowledge proof. Another one you tend to get, one I prefer when trying to introduce zero-knowledge proofs is the idea with having coloured billiard balls. The idea behind this is, imagine that you want to prove so the prover wants to prove that they can tell the difference between two coloured billiard balls, say they're red and green. But the person they're proving it to is colourblind and thinks these balls are identical. And so they don't believe there's any difference. And the way they can prove this is the verifier, Victor, can take these balls, which he thinks are identical, show them to the prover, and then put them behind his back and swap them over or not swap them over. bring them out again and ask the prover whether he has swapped them over. And the idea is that if there is indeed a difference between these balls that the prover can see, that she will be able to say whether that Victor has swapped them over or not. And if you do this once, if you just have one round of this, then the first time you could say that obviously Peggy will get this correct. She can see a difference between these two things, and she will give the correct answer. But for the verifier, they may think, well, of course, this was just a good guess. It's a 50-50 guess, so I'm not going to believe that there really is a difference. But if you go through a round of repeating this and go through an iteration, repeating this again and again, the chance of guessing this correctly each time drops off exponentially. And so eventually the verifier will become convinced that there is indeed a difference between these billiard balls that the prover knows. But in doing that, the verifier has not gained any other information. So they've not found out what this difference is. They don't know how the prover has worked out what the difference is, but they just know that there is some difference that they can detect. So those two are some of the sort of simplest, intuitive ideas behind a zero-knowledge proof, and some of the easiest ways to explain them. And I think it's interesting to think that we will go into some of the cryptography now, and we'll look at cryptographic means of doing zero-knowledge proofs. But it's interesting to think that here are some examples that are very physical, and it strikes me there is something quite fundamental going on here around maybe information theory. I'd love to have a chance to investigate this. We're using it. We use this because it is useful, and we're using the results of this. But I think there's a potential for a lot of research in this area to try to work out how come there is this idea of zero knowledge, and we can do this in many, many different ways. Okay, so when we talk about zero knowledge proofs, there are really two aspects. So we're often talking about a proof system. We're trying to prove something beyond the doubt of the verifier. And there's also a zero-knowledge aspect. In the proof system, I mean, there's been research about this for a very long time. But there are two parts that we really require. We want completeness. And what this means is that if the prover is honest and gives a correct proof, that the verifier will believe this. The verifier is not just going to deny this again and again, that there's a high probability that the correct proof will be accepted by the verifier. And on the converse, there's the idea of soundness, so that if you have a dishonest prover, someone who gives a false proof, then the verifier will be able to detect this. So that's the kind of the proof side. But then in addition, we need the sort of zero-knowledgeness of this. And so this is, I mean, we've seen the examples in those first two examples. You've got your proof, and then the verifier has some means of checking this. But whatever they do to check this, whatever protocol they've used, they should just come up with an answer of whether the proof is true or false and gain no other information. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, the examples I gave did not rely on cryptography in any way, but in the work we're probably doing, and for those of you who are involved in projects, I'm sure it's the same with you, you're going to use cryptography. And there are some cryptographic primitives and cryptographic ideas that really underline a lot of the work that has been done in zero-knowledge proofs, a lot of the research. So some of them, they are very straightforward, and they are things that are also used very much in blockchain as well. So the discrete log problem and collision-resistant hashes, these are very well known. I'm sure you all know about these. Typical thing, the idea is that trapdoor functions, the idea is that you can do a function one way, and it's very difficult to brute force. It's very difficult to go the opposite way. Also, we particularly in zero-knowledge proofs, some primitives that people have used, or some ideas people have used, are knowledge of exponents and groups of unknown order. I'm not going to go into this in detail. There's a good, Vitalik did a good blog post about this to explain in his ZKP Snark series. But the idea is for knowledge of exponents, when we're doing zero-knowledge proofs, we're often looking at polynomials and proving that these in fact match, that we can match polynomials together. And so looking at a pair of points, we're trying to prove that if there's some value k that is unknown, that this doesn't sort of leak between the prover and the verifier. A lot of the zero-knowledgeness of ZK Snarks comes down to this fact. And then groups of unknown order, again, is the idea. This is an example from cryptographic accumulators, but the idea behind these, again, is that there is some information. In this case, it's the order of the group that is kept secret, and so you cannot then brute force back information and gain more information about the system if, for example, you are a dishonest verifier. Okay, now this is just a little diagram to show typically what a zero-knowledge proof or protocol or system might consist of, the steps involved in it. Particularly this is so ZK Snark. You would have some algorithm that defines the proof that you're trying to represent. There's going to be that you're trying to give to the verifier, and the verifier and the prover obviously have to have some common understanding of this. And then there will be some trusted setup or some ceremony involved in creating this or defining this. And then particularly in Snarks, this then becomes a mathematical representation and goes through a series of transformations that take something that potentially you could write this, maybe it's a high-level language you've written this algorithm in, or some definition of the algorithm, and you turn this into some mathematical representation that can then be used in a proof that is so that the proof is still going to be succinct and it's going to be able to be used in reasonable time and in reasonable memory. This will produce particularly a proving key. So this is some data that the prover needs to produce the proof, and also a verifying key that the verifier needs to be able to check the proof. And then the prover, Peggy, she can take her secret, often called a witness, and with the proving key, she can produce a succinct proof, whatever it is she's trying to prove knowledge of this secret. And then this succinct proof will be given to the verifier, Victor, and then he can use his verifying key to then verify that is indeed a correct proof. And if it's zero knowledge, then he'll gain other information on the way. If you look at this in terms of some of the projects such as, say, Socrates, which is doing this on Ethereum, you could start off here, they have their own DSL to create the algorithm for the proof, which is then turned into, it goes through mathematical representation. Off-chain, you can create the succinct proof. And the verifying key, effectively, the thing that does the check is a smart contract, so that anybody can then verify it. And the proof is then giving it a smart contract, which the function of the contract will come back with a true or false to see whether that proof is true. Okay, another way to look at this is to say, effectively the same kind of process, but if you imagine this is, if we're talking about, say, a cryptocurrency, you start off with the idea of, you know that you have some keys for this, and from that you turn this into some polynomials, and then and you have them in a particular relationship. So that's kind of one part. This is the mathematical representation part of this process. And then to stop the prover or the verifier cheating, we then have the compliance idea that we're picking points on these polynomials that are chosen randomly for the verification. So it's really just another way of thinking about the previous slide. Okay, so zero-knowledge proofs, I mean, they've become very popular, particularly since blockchains become popular, but they have been around for a long, long time. And their kind of history, I think, has been shaped by a couple of improvements or changes, in that there have been improvements to the cryptographic primitives, and people have done research on better curves and better hash functions, etc. And this has really pushed the research forward. Although there's also been people making fundamental changes to the way that we think about zero knowledge, and those approaches have made quite big changes and brought us to where we are. There's a great blog post, The Cambrian Explosion, which is all about this. I really do recommend people read that. There's a link there. But to go through the history very quickly. So it's back in the 1980s that really the first papers started to be published about this. And Sadly, the initial papers, they were rejected by conferences when they first came out, so they, sort of for a couple of years, these were being rejected, and not really seen as being useful. I think people were very much focused, as this quote from Matthew Green comes in, they were very much focused on how you can, about proving things and how you can check that a proof is valid. And what so the people writing these papers really did was to turn this on its head and saying, well, what about the verifier in this situation, in this process as well? What if we can't trust them? And they started to think about it in a very different way. And I think maybe that was one of the reasons why these things took a while to be accepted and start to be seen. But anyway, during the 80s, these started out, and particularly, a very powerful bit of research in sort of the early 90s, where they started looking at problems in NP and proving that any problem in NP could be represented by a zero-knowledge proof. So that really made this a very powerful area of technology. And then during the 90s, etc., and the early part of this century, people carried on incrementally adding ideas and improving the way things were going. Adding things like effective set membership, range proofs, and then particularly the Jens Groth's paper in 2016 really made a great change, because it allowed people to produce succinct proofs and produce proofs that could then be used and that we could run, and as we can see now running on the blockchain and be used very. They had sufficient performance that they could be used widely, and that was really a sea change in the whole thing. So current areas of research, and I do apologise if I've missed your project or your area, so please do tell me, and I can add it to the slides. But I try to think of it in 4 areas. So there are Snarks really are perhaps the leading or the most popular way of looking at zero-knowledge proofs at the moment, and there have been some improvements to the way they are being used, some projects that improve those. Also, I think recursive snarks are starting to be looked at, and that's quite a fundamental area of research. But snarks are not the whole thing, and there are alternatives to them. And then also, we have to think about post-quantum cryptography as well. And in going through the projects, I tried to get them to fit into this kind of scheme, but it's not perfect. Some of them kind of rely on a number of these aspects, as we shall see. I find it generally very difficult when I'm trying to talk about zero-knowledge proofs to get a framework for this, because people really do borrow from different areas of cryptography and mix and match so widely. People are very creative in this area, which is great, but it's very difficult then to represent this in a simple framework. But this is the approach I'm going to take for this anyway. Okay, so improvements to snarks. We have some. There have been improvements to do with the cryptographic primitives. So you've got improvements on hashing functions, MIMC, Poseidon, StarkAdd. Because one of the most expensive parts in terms of computation can be hash functions, particularly doing a SHA-256 hash or something like that. And so these projects have really reduced the amount of computation needed to do that. And MIMC really looking at the fact that when we are doing zero-knowledge proofs and we're doing cryptography, we're using large finite fields, and that the computation really needs to be to expect that. And so they're trying to minimize the amount of multiplication needed, rather than doing sort of bitwise and working on small fields. A very important thing about zero-knowledge proofs, and one that really occupies people's attention, is the idea of a trusted setup. So generally for a ZK Snark, traditionally these have required a trusted setup. So Aztec recently did their ignition ceremony. Did anybody take part in this? No? Okay, I was the only one. But it lasted for quite a few weeks. It was a multi-party computation and was there to create what's called a common reference string, so that and it was done as a multi-party computation, so that people could be confident that there would be no cheating going on in creating some data that was needed for the rest of the process. Zcash had a similar thing. They've done it a couple of times. People have been very inventive with Zcash and how they ran the multi-party computation. People have used that as an example of someone who had some radioactive material from Chernobyl and then used that to produce the source of randomness for the computation, etc. So they're seen as perhaps a drawback to ZK Snarks because they are involved. They do take a long time. They do require a lot of setup. They do require a lot of people to be involved. I think also, though, perhaps you should think the fact that by doing these ceremonies, you are involving a lot of people in your project. So I think they do have a plus side as well, and they do get people interested in the idea and interested in your product. But they are an overhead, and people generally do not like this kind of overhead and would have been looking for alternatives to these. So the first, when Snarks were really first being used, I guess, they all required a unique setup, and the idea was, for a particular problem you were trying to solve, a particular algorithm that you were trying to produce a proof for, you had to have this setup. So this setup would then provide the information that the prover and the verifier would share, and he would describe the project, the proof, and this had to be done in advance, and once you've done it, then that was that. If you then change your algorithm or change the proof that you were trying to do, then you would have to run a new setup. So it was seen as quite a limitation. But the alternative, and I'll come on to these later, but the alternative to these, if you don't have a trusted setup, is then you tend to get larger proof sizes. So the actual proof itself is much larger, or it may take much longer to verify. So there was a trade-off here that you're getting a succinct proof and reasonable times for verification, but you had to go through this process initially. So some of the work, particularly in the last year, there's been people have focused on this and tried to find a way of doing a universal setup. So the idea, and these are some of the projects, the idea is that you don't have to, once you've done your trusted setup, you could then potentially change what the algorithm is doing and update it and make it more efficient. And that's been one of the big breakthroughs, I think, in the last, say, 18 months with Sonic and Plonk, Marlin, for example. I'm not going to go into this in much detail because Zach Williamson from Aztec is giving a talk this afternoon, I think it is, about this, and I think this is exactly what he's going to talk about, so please go to that talk instead. But the idea behind these projects really is about improving this first step in the ZK Snark, improving this trusted setup. So recursive snarks are a very interesting idea, and they rely on cycles of elliptic curves, which can be difficult to find, and can be difficult to process. But the idea generally behind a recursive snark is, if I have some proof of knowledge of one thing, it may be that I can then take a proof that I have that proof initially. And so you can continue doing this. You continue recursively producing proofs of proofs of proofs, and by this way, it reduces really the amount that the amount of proofs that you need to do. And so the Zcash team, Electric Coin Company, with the Halo project, which doesn't require a trusted setup, and hopefully my next slide. Yeah, so one of the major ones, Coda, doing this. So they did this with an eye to the blockchain. So in a typical blockchain we're using, we have this idea we want to be able to verify blocks and verify transactions, and if you're involved in the blockchain, you need to verify all of this. It's quite an expensive process that you need to just keep doing, and you end up with huge blockchains. I mean, Ethereum in particular. What Coda have done is to say, well, rather than do that, why don't we just have a proof of a particular block height of the validity of this blockchain, and then we can pass that proof around instead, and then for the next block we can get a proof we can do just proofs of proofs and effectively iterate back down through the blocks. And so their blockchain they say it has about a constant size, about 20 kilobytes, and it is fairly quick to verify, And they're just using recursive composition of ZK snarks to do that. Another idea, so another perhaps way of approaching this is to use distributed processing. So DISC have the idea that if you're doing your snark, you need to, you have the proof, it needs to be verified. This could be a complex, costly computation, and so they have the idea of distributing this over, just the traditional way that you would distribute any computational task. One of the things that will take time is this idea of the amount of logic gates. So in your initial algorithm, this will be turned in a ZK snark into a number of logic gates, and there is a typically an upper size dictated by the performance because of the amount of processing that you'll need to do. So there's a typical upper size of the size of your algorithm that you're going to be able to prove. And so DISC say that they can really up this because they can then farm out a lot of the processing to multiple machines and therefore make the whole thing more performant. Perhaps another way of looking at it is concurrently. I don't know a great deal about this project. It's just one I came across recently. But the idea is that you have, rather than sort of having one prover, one verifier, and even if you ship this out to multiple machines, the idea that you could have multiple provers and verifiers, and it will still be safe, even in a setting where, he says you could corrupt many of them. Okay, so I spoke about the trusted setup and how people see this as a real, potentially be a real disadvantage, and there are alternatives to this. So the one that people will perhaps best know are Starks. There's one of the papers there for Aurora, and people have done more projects on these. Some of the background to this has been around for quite a while, but was not seen as really feasible. But instead of a trusted setup, you can use a public randomness, and this is the transparency that you have in the name of these things. And really all you need is to be in agreement on a hash function between the prover and the verifier. Just quickly, the process, they go through this intermediate representation of a program, which it's really going through a set of steps, and you're looking at the traces of them. They described it as like being registers, and you just go through the steps and have the functions to produce the next step. Starting this intermediate representation, and then it's further defined, and goes through the Fry protocol, etc. I won't go into that anymore. Again, so there's better people to talk about it than me. This afternoon. There'll be a talk about that, so please check that out if you're interested. And this results in some pretty good scalability. So what you have here is we've got the time against the complexity. So these different levels were different kind of bands of number of gates, and you can see that. For a snark, as the number of gates increases, the actual setup time increases massively. But the verification time is not too bad. But with Starks, I mean, you don't really need trust setup, so it's just everything is just really constant. So they're very very scalable from that point of view. Similarly, another take on this, with the idea of not having a trusted setup, is Bulletproofs from Stanford. They rely particularly on the idea of a range proof, but also Supersonic, who also try to moving away from having a trusted setup, Spartan as well. So there's not quite a lot of projects coming out in this area trying to move away from the trusted setup. And this just is a quick little diagram to show some of the ideas of the performance for these things. So you see that typically the snarks, they're very succinct, whereas with the Stark they're much larger, and the verifier, it's a constant complexity time, But they have disadvantages. So we have some strong cryptographic assumptions underlying our snarks. Whereas for a Snark, we just say we need to agree on some hashes. And then Snarks have the additional advantage, because of this, that their underlying reliance just on hashes, that they are post-quantum resistant. So, yeah, so there's a lot of research going on in that area. Also fractal, so they're taking a similar approach to Snarks in Aurora. But they also have this additional step that they apply an encoding, so to reduce the amount of information that is needed in the input. And then Marlin and Plonk, so they're doing the Snark projects, they also do a similar idea of encodings, but it's at a different process. So all of these projects, they're really kind of, I see them as very creative. They're all very much borrowing from each other and using a lot of different types of ideas in cryptography to achieve succinct and performant proofs. Post-quantum, so interestingly, I mean, the problems you'd get post-quantum, for a sufficiently powerful post-quantum computer, obviously this is, for some value of sufficiently, but this could weaken some of the cryptography that underlies some aspects of zero-knowledge proofs. But whenever I speak to people involved in this area, they always tell me it's about 10 years away, pretty much like nuclear fusion. But those primitives are the ones that will potentially be affected by quantum cryptography. Not so the hash functions, which is why Snarks are seen as quantum proof. And so there's been research so coming out of lattice-based cryptography. So this is a type of cryptography that is quantum resistant, relying on problems such as I think it's the nearest vector problem, to produce similar ideas that you get with your elliptic curve cryptography, but in a way that is quantum proof. And then people have taken that, and there's some projects where they've used that to start to build zero-knowledge proofs based on those as well. So links to some there. If we go to use cases now, obviously cryptocurrencies, perhaps the one that people will know best, Zcash, Grin, Monero, Grin and Monero are using Bulletproofs. But also Nightfall from Ernst Young and ZK Die, all using some aspects of zero knowledge. And it's been as a use case, it's been a fairly successful one. But there are other ones. So those use cases are very much focusing on the privacy aspect of zero knowledge proofs, trying to protect the information of who has sent some token to someone else, and so keep that secret. But that's just one aspect of zero-knowledge proofs. And if you look at the proof side, we have some use cases in blockchain scalability. So, for example, a very well-known project, I think, is Rollup. So this can increase the transactions per second on Ethereum. The idea being that transactions are bundled together and proofs are made of the transactions, which then gets put on the mainnet. So you don't need to verify everything. You can accept the proof. Similar projects, ZK Sync. So all of these, particularly targeting the idea of it being a proof system and having a succinct proof of some more expensive computation rather than being about the privacy side. Other use cases. One I particularly like, and I got some slides here from Los Alamos laboratories, is nuclear verification. So it's very important that some countries can verify what's happening with nuclear weapons, and if you're claiming that you are getting rid of them, you need to be able to prove this to the satisfaction of the other nations involved. But in a secure way, and in a way that does not give away your secrets. I mean, you're going to want to keep your secrets about your weapons. And so zero-knowledge proofs have been used in this area. The project that this came from Los Alamos ended up with, this is the architecture they used. If I can explain it, they were trying to really give proofs of a lot of areas of their system. So they had some neural network that was involved in showing that, involved in the verification, but they had then to have proofs that this network model had not been tampered with, that the output from the model was what it should be, that also the inputs were what they should have been, and all of this then had to be signed. So they ended up with quite a few proofs, proving all the different aspects of the system. This is one of their slides. I have no idea what Darth Vader's doing on there, but I guess he's an attacker or something. I don't know. But so yeah, so they've got a system where they've produced multiple proofs in zero knowledge around the whole area. So an important one, and I do recommend this. These slides actually, because they do some very nice introductions to zero knowledge proofs as well. They go through in a very nice way, very clearly. So yeah, it's worth checking out. Another aspect that I see quite a bit is around identity. There's a startup in Berlin called Kilt who are working on this, but also there's a lab been set up at Napier University in Edinburgh looking at identity, particularly on blockchain, but a large part of that then is around zero-knowledge proofs, how those can be used to preserve your identity and preserve leakage of personal information. Resources, if you're interested in this area, want to learn more, we run some workshops, so please come to our workshops. We run these in London. We're trying to do these roughly once a month. They are free for developers, free to anyone who wants to come along. These are some photos from a recent one we had. And typically it's a 2-day workshop, so we have a day roughly talking through the theory of zero-knowledge proofs, and we try to get speakers from projects in the area, such as Zcash. And then we also have a mini hackathon, and this is a photo of the people who won the mini hackathon there. So yeah, we run these in London, and we've done them in Oxford, but we really like to expand. So if you have a venue that you could, you're willing to help us with hosting them, then please let us know. We'd love to do them elsewhere and get more people into this space. We have a blog and resources from there about zero-knowledge proofs, doing an introduction to the field in general, and also going through, particularly around ZKP Snark, so going through the theory and the maths involved. So you can check that out also. That's it. Thank you for attending and this first talk in the privacy stack. I have some laptop stickers if you want some, but there are some excellent talks coming up going into more details around this space, so please do go have a look. Zach is a great speaker. Aztec is a great team, so yeah, I really recommend going to see them. There's some great workshops, so I'm sure you'll all enjoy those. But thank you for coming. Thank you. I don't know what time we have.
We're really short on time.
Okay, so yeah, if a very quick question.
Like really quickly, anyway.
If you want to come talk to me, ask me questions afterwards, that's fine. I don't want to hold up my speaker. All right, thank you.
We're looking for Marcus up next. Marcus talking about stablecoins.
I asked my colleague at EDF Energy to come and see you.
Yes, I think you already have.
Yeah.
You're in on this one.
Yeah. Because we have a subsidiary in England, EDF Energy.
Okay.
No. Sam. Hey, thanks for the talk. I came out from Colorado. There's a number of people who are very interested in zero-knowledge proofs. But I am an organization called Cryptorado, and we're basically just promoting blockchain technology and cryptocurrency generally and the underlying tech. If we could maybe potentially bridge a meetup or something, maybe even online too, and get a workshop going, because I know there are a lot of people who would definitely be interested in the Colorado community. So just reach out here.
Yes, just contact me.
Great. My name's Sam, by the way. I would shake your hand, but let's not do that. Yeah.
So I think we're going to do next week. And that was maybe you next week.
No, I'm not. You met last summer in July in London. Yes. I was thinking it's in Paris, so I'm teaching in a small blockchain. So you have a room, so we do that Friday or Saturday. I send you an email to remember, and that's
Hi, I'm Richard.
I have yes, we'll see if we can do them all tomorrow, we will.
Should I use just the okay.
We left Berlin at the right time, right? Now everybody's leaving. So what's your model? They closed the second school.
I like to teach, and also meet people in the area.
That's fine. Lucas is like laying in the bed next to me and my train to hold him.
Maybe we can go here, guys. I took your card.
Good.
So,
Can you send the link at the end of your presentation?
Yes, your website. ETHCC,
It's actually not, in general, not that much, and the biggest fear that I have, which is actually quite low as far as I know,